All right, guys, I think I'm live right now. Let me see. Give me a moment. Yeah, I think I'm live. All right, what's going on, guys? Give me a second to set up here. What's going on, family? How you guys doing? All right, cool. All right, so I think we have some people coming in now. Let me know if you guys can hear me. If everything. All right. So what's going on, guys? You know, it's Home Team here. I'm back at it with another live of African history, culture, and worldview. What's going on, Nana? Koku. Man, you gotta pronounce that name for me. That's interesting. So yeah, as you guys can see, I started a Kickstarter campaign. This is my first Kickstarter campaign ever. Um, and so I need you guys to support it. What's going on, Emmanuel? Salute, man. I'm glad you guys could be here. How was your weekend? I hope everybody had a good weekend, man. It's not easy out here. So, like I was saying, I started my first Kickstarter campaign. My son is young right now, and I really want I really wanted to start the process of, teaching him how to know Africa. Ultimately, I wanted to teach him African history. Weekend was all right, brother. Thanks, man. Yeah, most def. Awesome. That's good to hear, man. Awesome. Yeah, so I wanted to start the process of teaching my son African history. Because, in popular culture, as he goes through his schooling and stuff like that, he's going to learn about different historical figures, like, say, Alexander the Great, or say, Napoleon, or, the Julius Caesars and stuff like that. But is he really going to learn anything about, great historical figures from the African continent? Because, as when I was a youth, I wasn't really privy to that information. As I grew older, I had to teach myself African history. And I have a degree in history. I went to school to learn history, and I didn't really learn many of these prodigious African figures, on the continent. And that's one of the reasons why, I started this channel. And I think it's one of the reasons as well why, like, we have to start learning history, for ourselves, ultimately, as a people group. And so I created this Kickstarter campaign. You guys came at the right time because, I'm in the process of actually teaching my son, African history. And it really just fuses all the knowledge that I've garnered over the years, into this one book. So the Kickstarter campaign is called, Home Team Presents Kings of Africa. And I'm placing all my knowledge essentially into this book about the most prodigious kings on the African continent. These are in my opinion, the greatest kings on the African continent. Um, Now, some of the kings on this list you guys would know, and some of them you won't. And I think that's critical because, if we let the story be told by, other people, essentially, we wouldn't really know who our great historical figures are. Like, we had to be the ones to tell that. And I think I have a really good list, a really good solid list. Like, some of the people on the list you'll know about, like, say, Mansa Musa, right? But there are plenty of kings, in my opinion, on the list that you guys have probably never heard of, and I think that's a good thing. So definitely, support the Kickstarter. It has really good illustrations. It has really good maps and timelines. I've been working on it for a while, and that's one of the reasons why, I haven't been producing as much. And also, I said, we were gonna start doing animation and stuff like that, but we really put all our time and energy into creating this Kickstarter, creating this book, because it's going to be a really, really good one, not just for your children, like I think for the community at large, ultimately. So I really want to push this book. I have a pinned comment up there for you guys. You can click the link, support it, and we'll get this thing moving. I really hope you guys enjoy it, and I really hope it's successful as well. So yeah, man. Today I wanted to talk about uh, African honor codes. African honor codes. Appreciate that, Emmanuel. Appreciate that. So yeah, today I wanted to talk about African honor codes. And I know I have some boxing fans in here, man, because every time I do a live, we kind of touch on boxing a little bit. But over the weekend, trust me, this is relevant this time. Over the weekend, there was a really big fight where Terrence Crawford fought Saul Canelo Alvarez. Let me know if you guys have heard of him before. Did Africans have martial arts? Definitely, 100%. Mr. DC Comics. Yes, they did. Yeah, so there was this big fight over the weekend. It was Terrence Crawford versus Saul Canelo Alvarez. Yeah, man. Crawford did his thing, man. Yes, absolutely. Crawford did his thing. So basically for those who, and again, this is relevant. I'm tying it all in. I'm tying it all in. So just bear with me. So Terrence Crawford basically he did one of the greatest things we've seen in boxing. I think in years, like, and I don't think it's ever been done before. He is now, I think he's three times undisputed in different weight classes. So in boxing, they have different weight classes, and in each weight class, they have like several titles essentially. And so there's like multiple champions in one weight class. And what Terrence Crawford did is he went to this one weight class and he defeated everybody, or he defeated the person who had all the belts essentially, and he became absolutely undisputed in that weight. And then he went to another weight and he became undisputed in that weight, gaining all the belts. And then, this past Saturday, he defeated Canelo Alvarez and he went up to 168. He used to be at 147, I believe. Um and he went up to 168 and he got all the belts in that division. And he became undisputed. And apparently that's never been done before in boxing history. So that's really significant. Canelo is a Mexican fighter, so and Canelo is a beast. He is a legend on his own right. So I think he's in my personal opinion, is one of the best Mexican fighters of all time. So yeah, so Terrence Crawford defeated Canelo Alvarez, and in the post-fight press conference, what happened after that in that post-fight press conference was something really interesting, and it's what I'm gonna kind of tie into the African honor code. And let me guys know if you know what I'm talking about. If you guys saw like the press conference or anything like that, it was really interesting. It's something I've never seen before in boxing, and I've been watching boxing for some time. I see you guys talking about African martial arts. Capoeira actually from Brazil. It came from it's like an Africanism, if you will, from the African continent. A lot of those enslaved Africans, specifically from Central Africa, brought this fighting form into Brazil, and later it evolved into capoeira. So black men absolutely had their own sort of defense mechanisms or martial arts, if you will. So yeah, so like I said, I'm gonna be tying in, the boxing reference, Terrence Crawford versus Canelo Alvarez, into the African honor code. So this whole video is more broadly about, the honor code of black men, and it's not something I really hear much about within our community, in my opinion. Let me know if you guys like really hear about the word honor specifically when we're talking about having character and stuff like that. I don't really hear that word honor as much in our community. I could be wrong, but Anyway, so we're talking about African honor codes, and to start this off, I wanted to talk about the Oyo Empire, the honor code specifically of the Yoruba people. All right, so the Oyo Empire, for those who may not know, Oyo was in southwestern Nigeria. And the Oyo Empire was pretty much one of the city states of the Yoruba people. I'm sure, most of you have heard of the Yoruba people before. They're in, mostly southwestern Nigeria. And so, kind of like, the Greek city states, they had their own city states. Even though they were one ethnic group, they had the same language and same culture, they still had sort of rivaling city states, if you will. Not as much as the Greeks, I would say, but, it was very similar. One of the most powerful, I shouldn't say one of, I think the most powerful city state the Yoruba had was Oyo. I would think most scholars would agree with that. And Oyo was by far the most powerful city state. And over time, it became this large empire in southwestern Nigeria. It expanded into parts of modern day Benin as well. So yeah, Oyo was yeah, they were a force to be reckoned with. And one of the reasons why Oyo became so powerful was because they had a cavalry unit. And in this forest zone, if you will, in Africa, in Nigeria, southwestern Nigeria, there weren't a lot of ethnic groups that had access to horses. And if they did, it was very difficult to keep those horses alive because, in that part of Africa, they had a very specific fly that, killed horses essentially. It was like a disease. I forget the exact word. I'm sure some of you guys know. But basically, the Oyo Empire was able to monopolize the trade in horses, and they had a really strong, powerful cavalry unit ultimately, and they used that cavalry to conquer and dominate the region for the most part. So Oyo became really powerful. The origin of Oyo was about 1300, and then sort of the apotheosis of the empire didn't really come about until about the 17th or 18th century. Right, yeah, the Tsetse fly. Appreciate that, 777. Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah, so it was a fly in the region that, gave these horses a I guess a specific disease. I haven't gone too in depth into that history specifically, but I know there was a deterrent for cavalry in that part of tropical Africa specifically. But the Sahel region was very different. Cavalry thrived in that region because they didn't have that issue. Appreciate that. So, um, so the oil people. Okay, so the honor code amongst the black men of the Yoruba people, I'd say was very unique. And some would even say that it was pretty extreme as well. So, okay, one of the things that Oyo was able to do was they were able to conquer Daomi. Um, and for those of you who have seen the movie, what's it called, Woman King? Let me know if you guys saw the movie Woman King in the chat. So basically, in the movie Woman King, it was featuring the Daomi Amazons or the Mino. I believe they called themselves the Mino. There were several different terms or names for them. I have to look back in my notes for their specific term, who like what they called themselves. But we know them today in Western society as the Daomi Amazons, and we they recently did a movie on the Daomi Amazons called The Woman King, and Viola Davis was featured in it. And in that movie, she was essentially fighting against the Yoruba people, the Oyo Empire, because Oyo was a tributary to, I'm sorry, Daomi was a tributary to the greater Oyo Empire. So basically, Oyo was the big kid on the block, if you will, and so Daomi was paying tribute to Oyo. And in the movie, there was a specific scene that pointed to the honor code of the Yoruba men of that time, and it was really, really interesting. And I wonder if you guys caught that scene. Nice. Right, right. That's what's up. So basically, in the movie, I forget the scene specifically, and I'm kind of paraphrasing, but basically, the general, the oil general at the time, he was in a very precarious situation. So he, I guess he felt like, he lost the battle or something like that. He didn't have many options, and he was telling, I guess, one of the soldiers or somebody, I don't know, I forget what it was specifically, but he basically said, "Hey, I can't go back to oil because they're going to force me to retire myself indefinitely through self-infliction." And he didn't say it like that, obviously, but I hope you understand what I'm saying, because of YouTube, I can't say certain things or whatever. But think about it, retiring yourself through self infliction permanently. I hope you understand what I mean. Basically, so I'll make a reference for you guys. I think in Japanese culture, it's called, I could be wrong. I think it's called harikari. So basically, think of the samurai, the samurai culture and the honor code, if you will, of the samurai. What they did was they did a similar thing or the same thing that the people in the oil empire were doing, and I find that really interesting because I really hope you guys know what I'm talking about. Yeah, senpuku. Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. It wasn't just in Japan. I appreciate that, man. Let me know where else they were doing seppuku. Please let me know. I'm actually really interested in that. So basically, yeah, just think of all the Japanese movies you've seen with the samurai and their honor code and things of that nature, and what the Japanese would do um, to ensure that they themselves and their family have honor ultimately. And it was the same way essentially, or very similar within the oil empire. Basically, when it came to the oil empire, the general, if he did not meet some objective of the oil state, or if he failed in his mission, then they would force him to uh, seppuku himself, if you will, in the African way, if you will. The best way I can describe it, to try uh, to try to maintain my YouTube status, if you will, is retiring yourself indefinitely through self infliction. And the oil elites would tell the general or would request the general to actually do that. Now, I don't know if this actually happened in history. Like, I don't know if a general who actually did this, in the record or in oral history, but it is documented that this was part of their honor code. So I think man, it's something really interesting to look into. It's something that I've never heard any African historian really mention like that for real. Because when I heard about it, I was just like, wow, like, because I was really like years along in my journey, studying African history, and I've never heard this before. And I thought it was interesting because it was so similar to, I would say, Japanese culture. I don't know which one is older or whatever, but it's just very similar. And I've never heard of black men specifically on the African continent having that idea of honor, of having an honor code that way. Now that's more of like a military sort of honor code. Like the Yoruba have a general foundational honor code that's more applicable to the general society. But this is I want to say the most extreme, if you will, honor code from the military. I guess the point of it is to say that they took honor very, very seriously. I like how you phrase that, honorable self deletion. I appreciate that, melanated. So basically, if the general failed, he would have to honorably self uh, retire himself through a self inflicted wound. So yeah, sorry, I'm reading your comments as well here. So basically, yeah. So in the movie and the Woman King, the man, the Yoruba, the Yoruba general was just like, I'm not gonna go back to oil because they're gonna request for me to end everything, end it all. So in a sense, he wasn't being honorable, to be honest. So that's really interesting to learn about that honor code amongst the Yoruba people. Now we have the Zulu as well. They had a very interesting honor code as well. It wasn't, on that level, but I think I just named probably the most dynamic, if you will, honor code I've ever heard on the African continent. So I think when it comes to the Yoruba people in general, when it comes to honor, like how they define honor, for them, honor is like moral balance or moral steadiness. Honor is being gracious. Honor is being uh honor is like is having self-control as well, which is a big thing. Um Basically, what honor is in Yoruba culture is very similar to what honor is on in other parts of the continent and around the world. Honor is honor. Honor is a human idea. So things like like I said, moral steadiness, truthfulness, self control, and being generous, being a good person. For the Yoruba, your character is your beauty. And so it was very important to have good moral character. And in the military, it was very important to be honorable. This isn't, honor for African people wasn't about yourself. It wasn't about the individual. Being honorable meant that you were looking out for the needs and concerns of your community. Your life was didn't really matter as much. You had to do for the group. And it's true for many people groups around the world. Like that system existed, not just in Africa, but in many parts of the world. So I think one way, and it was very similar for the Zulu as well. And I think one way for us to define honor for Africans, or to make it more clear to us, is to understand what was dishonorable on the African continent. So one of the ways Black men define honor is, I guess in reverse, was if you didn't have self control, that's one way they identified you lacking honor. When you abused your power, that's one way of lacking honor. When you were a coward, when you ran away, that was really big for the Zulus. Like you're not just gonna run away in a battle. Like if you run away, that's it for you, pretty much. That's it's again, it's not this individual system. It's more about the group. What is salubrious for the entire nation? What is healthy for the group? That is the foundation of what honor is ultimately. And when you break oaths, when you go back on your word, uh, and when you bring shame to your family, ultimately, these are just general things where you lose honor. And I think in our society, in our modern society, I think we kind of touch on these things a little bit in different ways, but we never like it's never like coalesced into an honor code, if you will. Like there's no like honor like narrative. Like it's rare that you would go, at least in my opinion, from what I see, like it's rare that you would go to say somebody on social media. They would talk about these things again individually, but we don't really call it like honor like that. It's not brought together into, hey, be honorable. Um, and I think that's interesting, because honor was very important. It was critical for African people, in particular Black men, on the African continent. That was a pretty big thing. I see you guys talking there. Okay. All right. So yeah. So one of the ways that the Zulu thought you were being dishonorable was, I have some notes here, was by boasting, by drunken disorder, when you abuse your dependents, and by desertion, when like you're insubordinate essentially. So the Zulu and the Yoruba have a very similar model of what honor is. Basically, what is good for the group? What kind of character do you have as an individual? What value are you bringing to the world aside from your own self interest? These are the rules of our society. Are you abiding by it? Are you honoring that? And are you honoring your family? So yeah, the African honor code is very similar to just the ideas that we have of honor today. And I feel like that's something we need to stress more in our communities. I'd like I'd like for us to hear more about black men in our community telling our young ones you had to be honorable and defining what that means for them and living that as well. And we have a lot to take from the African continent. I only scratched the surface on what honor really is in general from a sort of African perspective. I took a more extreme example, from the oil empire, because I was trying to show you like how important it was, like how critical it was, how they took it deathly serious, if you will. Like honor is important. Mr. DC, oh yeah, definitely. Did the women have a code? 100%. Out even for the Daomi Amazons or the Mino, they had an honor code as well. I don't know, I can't delineate it for you right here and now, but I think the movie the Woman King touched on it. Um because I don't think you can have a solid, valuable military without an honor code. Like that, it doesn't even make sense. But for example, not for example, I'm sorry, I'm slightly changing topics, but I'm giving you another. I'm sorry, I hope it didn't pause. Um, so another example of an honor code amongst women, African women specifically, is they had what's it called? They had like age group sort of secret societies, if you will. They're not, I don't think the term is secret society specifically, but I mean, men had this too, like men and boys, but women also had age group like secret societies. And basically, at a certain age, the woman would teach you what the code is for the community. And that's an honor code. So women definitely had that as well. Thank you for speaking to the power on this morning. Authentic power. Appreciate that. Sojourner's Truth. Appreciate that. Have you ever traveled to the African continent? And if so, where? So I actually plan to go to the African continent. I really want to go next year, to be honest. I haven't even told my wife this yet, but I plan to go next year, with my fam. I do. So I want to start out in Nigeria because apparently, according to DNA tests, most of my African ancestry is from Nigeria. So I want to start out, going to Nigeria. I do want to go to Zimbabwe as well. I think where is it? South, like Southern Africa is like beautiful from what I see. Like the most underrated places to me is Botswana, Zimbabwe, and Namibia. Like the pictures that I've seen in those regions are like they look amazing. They look incredible. I appreciate that, Yasha. Yeah, I was talking about my Kickstarter earlier. I'm gonna be teaching my son, African history pretty soon. So I wanted to share that with you guys. One of the first things I'm gonna be teaching him is, the prodigious figures from the African continent, the African kings. Because, a lot of times when we think about great historical figures, people in our community, we think of Alexander the Great, Napoleon, Julius Caesar, and these are all great figures, but they don't look like us ultimately, and we have to be the ones to teach our children because they're not gonna do it for us ultimately. And because I've been doing African history for a while, I've collected all this information, and in my opinion, this is the best African kings list ever because there's several kings on this list that I'm sure you guys have never heard of. And again, if we don't tell our story, we're not gonna know these people. They're gonna tell us about Mansa Musa, maybe. They're gonna tell us about the kings that they feel we need to know. but we need to study our history for ourselves and determine who our greats are ultimately. I think that's important. And in this list, I'm doing that ultimately for you guys. And I think one of the important things, the most salient things of for this book is that I'm taking from an African centered perspective. What I mean by that is that, for example, for one of the kings, I'll tell you his name, Sunny Ali, and there's going to be others as well, that he talked about as well. But Sunny Ali, because I talked about Sunny Ali before in a previous live. So there's Sunny Ali was a Songhai king, and there's a modern day Songhai scholar. His name is Hassimi Maga. He created a book, and he's basically balancing the oral history from the Songhai people with written history. And so he kind of balances those two in this book, and he takes a really important in African perspective that I haven't really even heard of when it comes to the Songhai kings, and that's included in the book. And I have his timelines in there, and his map system, if you will. So this is literally like from an African perspective. Like that's what, in my opinion, makes it unique. Because you can go on Google, you can go on Wikipedia, or you can just go, to any sort of book, and you'll sort of get a Western version of Sunny Ali. But I think it was important for us to get a Black African version of Sunny Ali from an African perspective because he is aware of the oral traditions of Sunny Ali. And when I read his material compared to sort of the Western version, and it's not that the Western version is wrong, it's just the omissions are what's critical. So what he's able to include in there is really salient, and it's just a beautiful book, man. It's one of my favorites because I get to see that African centered perspective on Sunny Ali. Zimbabwe and Namibia are beautiful. That's what's up. Also, there is great culture. Yeah, Ghana. Yeah, of course, Ghana as well. Definitely want to go to Ghana. No, I haven't been to Ethiopia. I'm not sure if you're talking to me. So yeah, guys, definitely support the Kickstarter. I believe we're about 30%, 40% funded. A lot of you guys have supported already, so I really appreciate that. It ends in about 26 days. But we want to get it funded as quickly as possible. And if we reach our goal and we get even more, I'm definitely gonna be doing more of those books, 100%. I mean, I gotta do one on African queens, right? So, but yeah, this is gonna be the most unique book, in my personal opinion, on the greatest African kings of the continent. It's gonna have maps, it's gonna have illustrations, it's gonna have timelines, and I really appreciate the work of Matt and Josh, over at Playwatch Animation or Playwatch Studios. They do a fantastic job. We've been working on this for a minute, so definitely go out and support your own, man. Definitely. So yeah, in general, I think when it comes to the African honor code, I guess the to sum it up, the African honor code is what defines an honorable man is basically somebody who has moral balance. Let me be more specific. Somebody who's essentially who practices restraint, somebody who has self control, somebody who's courageous, somebody who is generous. I think that's one thing I don't really hear much when it comes to honor. The idea of honor is being generous. Like when you look at the Yoruba concept of honor, when you look at the Zulu concept of honor, the idea of being generous is actually in there, which is interesting. I don't think I've really heard that before. I guess when you think of honor, you don't really think of being generous. I can just speak for myself, but I don't really think of being generous when I talk about honor or when I think about honor. So yeah, that's why it's important for us to to study African history, to study the past, to study the ideas of our ancestors from West and Central Africa, and we can sort of use it as a foundation to catapult us into the future, and we can customize it and see what works for us moving forward. Um, so yeah, I'm looking forward to it. That's any only so come out. So is that book out? No, the book isn't out yet. I just so this whole time I've been working on the book, and I recently finished it, like all the verbiage and everything. Um, so from what Matt was telling me, he said it's about 40 pages long. Yeah, so there's illustrations, maps, timelines on it. So I've been working on the book for a minute, and I tried to get very unique information on there. And by unique, I mean like mostly African centered. And when I say African centered, I'm talking about scholars from the African continent contributing to, who these kings were from an African perspective. What's going on, Greg? Oh, you missed a lot, man. We were talking about African honor codes. We were talking about the oil empire. We were talking about the Yoruba concept of honor. We were talking about um, what dishonor was for the Yoruba and the Zulu. And I'm gonna tie it into, like I said earlier, to Terrence Crawford and the Canelo fight. Oh, that's what's up. I appreciate that. 777. Thank you. Yeah, so definitely support the Kickstarter, guys. John Roper got that. So basically, you guys, I don't know who Young Ripper is. Definitely let me know. Okay, so where was I? Okay, so basically everything that I've been telling you guys about honor really ties into a modern moment from the Terrence Crawford Canelo fight. Did any of you guys see the Terrence Crawford Canelo fight at all? I'd really be curious to know if you guys watched it because I know I got some boxing fans in here. Can you please talk about honor in Kemetic and Nubian culture? Very well said. So, so when it comes to honor in, I'd say, Kushite culture specifically, you have King Payanki, right? He's one of my favorite Kushite kings. Oh, Greg, you saw the fight? Okay, that's what's up. Yeah, that was a great fight. All right, I'm gonna talk about that in a minute, but I'm gonna answer you, Aseda. This video wasn't really focused on Nubia or Kemet, but I'm gonna touch on it. Obviously, there are various honor codes, very similar, but various honor codes throughout the African continent. Um, but I was focusing more on Oyo and partly touched on the Zulu. But one of the things that stood out for me for King Payanki, uh, when it comes to I guess honor, was man. So basically, when it came to King Payanki, it seems as though they had a what I like to call a linear purpose. And what I mean by linear purpose is King Taharka's father, I believe, was Alara, or maybe it was his grandfather. I'm not sure exactly, but basically, there was another guy as well. There was Alara and was it Kashta? So basically, King Payanki's lineage. Let's just leave it at that. His lineage, but for the men before him, they wanted to conquer Egypt ultimately, um, and King Payanki never forgot that. And so, what King Payanki wanted to do was he wanted to honor the memory and the purpose of his lineage. And one way that Black men honor themselves or have an honor code is continuing the purpose of their lineage, continuing the ideals or the ambition or the goals of their lineage, of the men that came before them. And I thought that was really, really interesting about King Tarka. Like, Egypt wasn't conquered by King Payanki in one setting. His whole lineage contributed to the completion of taking over Kemet. And this wasn't necessarily, I would say, a nefarious goal because, warfare is traumatic, is horrible. Seemingly, what King Payanki was trying to do was to bring Kemet back into a sort of spiritual or cultural renaissance in which Egypt was coming back into what he felt was its own, ultimately, its own sort of African space. He thought it was adulterated by, I guess, foreign culture, or I would say own Nile Valley space. Because there were Libyans coming into Egypt, like Libyan princes and stuff like that, and apparently the Kushites felt they were adulterating the culture. And King Palanki, he kept the same energy. He said, "Before we go up into Egypt, I want you to bathe in a river." This was like a holy war for him, and he was continuing and honoring that linear purpose of the men who came before him from his lineage. So that's one way that, we as black men can have an honor code. What were the ideals of the men before us? What were they trying to accomplish? And I think in many ways, we try to maintain that and keep that same energy, which is great. But I don't know if we really title it honor, like I was kind of alluding to before. Like we may talk about like, hey, our ancestors did this, our ancestors did that, but we don't like really talk about it or specifically say this is what an honor code is. And I think it's important for us, for our children to know this is what being honorable is. This is what our ancestors valued. This is what our ancestors valued. I find the Mande honor code extremely interesting to be. Yeah, tell me more about that. That's what's up. Yeah, Canelo was frustrated. He couldn't figure out. All right, so man, man. All right, so to talk about Terrence Crawford again. So in the beginning of this live, I talked a little bit about Terrence Crawford and Canelo, and basically, Terrence Crawford did something that's never been done before in boxing history. In my opinion, he's like top three greatest of all time now because of that. Like he's next to Sugar Ray Robinson. Um, Honestly, the only reason why I may not put him above Sugar Ray Robinson and call him the greatest of all time is because Sugar Ray Robinson had like 180 something fights or something like that. It was ridiculous, and he moved up and weighed and became champion up there too. So like yeah, he was on another level. But Terrence Crawford, undefeated. He became undisputed in three different weight classes. That's never been done before in boxing history. Undisputed means, in different weight classes, they have different like belts. So you have like multiple champions. So he beat all them guys essentially to have all the belts in one division. Then he went to the next division and did it. And then recently he went to another division. Not only did he go to another division, he moved up past three divisions essentially. He moved up in weight three weight classes to be undisputed in that weight class. I, it just it's unheard of. It's unheard of, and that's why like so many people were doubting him. So many people were saying, "Oh, you too small," or "You never took punches in that weight class. You can't do it." And they were right. Honestly, they were like logically thinking, what he was doing made no sense like at all. Um, and so like that was one of my concerns. I thought Terrence Crawford was a great fighter, but to do that, I honestly my heart was telling me Terrence Crawford. Like I think he can do it, definitely. But my head, everything logically was saying that Canelo was gonna wash him. Anyway, I'm just really impressed by his victory. I'm a boxing fan. Anyway, so Crawford he goes up in weight and he completes his task. He he dominates Canelo. Like there aren't many words to describe what he really accomplished. Not only did he beat him, he dominated him. Like my man, Mr. DC said, Canelo was visibly frustrated in that fight. Yeah, they were talking big trash in the fight against Crawford. Yeah, 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 man. So Crawford, I think he fed off of like a lot of that negative energy because even when he was a kid, his mom was. I don't know if his mom was trying to motivate him. I don't know. Like that seems to be a relationship I don't really understand. I'll say that. But his mom would really kind of discourage him, and he said like in an interview like that filled him with rage, and he always wanted to prove people wrong. And he fed off that, man. He fed off that negative energy, and it created a monster. He became incredibly mentally strong from that. Um, Man, so where does the African honor code come in, if you will? So the African honor code comes in when it comes to character, ultimately. I don't know if you guys remember I was talking about the Yoruba view character as beauty, and it's part of being honorable. Um, so in the post-fight press conference, and I don't know if you guys seen this, because I watched everything, like even after the fight. So in the post-fight press conference, Crawford, he went up to Canelo and he literally gave him back the belts that he just took from him, essentially, all four belts. It was either four or five or whatever. And traditionally they say that boxers give those belts back because those specific belts that he had, it had like Mexican paraphernalia on it or whatever because Canelo earned those belts and he won it. And traditionally, those belts do go back, or most fighters at least give the belt back. But I've never like seen that displayed like on screen ever. Like maybe it has happened before. I just never seen it. So the belts usually goes, I guess the fighter, if if he wants to, he gives the belt back, to the fighter that he beat. But it's usually done like off screen, I guess. But Crawford, what he did is he went up to him to Canelo and his family, his wife and his kid, and he gave his belt back to Canelo, and it just showed how much respect that he had for Canelo and how honorable he was ultimately, like throughout that whole process, because they were talking a lot of trash and stuff like that, which is natural, but he squashed everything essentially. Canelo as well. Canelo was honorable in that process as well. And he just said in an interview, he was just like, I wanted to be the one to give him back his belts. Um, and I thought that was exceptional. Honestly, I thought that was a really brilliant display of character. And it was really honorable. And it was one of the inspirations for this video. Like black men being honorable in public spaces, in public and private, but in public spaces, showing a display of honor ultimately. Um, and I thought that was really unique. I've never seen that before. I don't know if you guys have ever seen that before. Maybe it has happened, but it was great. Yeah, right. So I thought it was interesting how Crawford, man, like you said, 777, like he throughout his life was feeding off of negative energy. Like he didn't allow it to destroy him. He allowed that negative energy to build him and to shape him and become even more honorable. And to me, that's exceptional. And I think that's something we, as Afro descendant men, can use. There's a lot of negative energy about who black men are ultimately. And I think we need to be able to take that negative energy and create something else from it. And that's what would make us magical ultimately. If we can take that energy and still be honorable, that's exceptional. Can you define what you mean by character, please? What I mean by character is having self-control. I'll define it how like essentially the Yoruba define it. Having self-control, being morally balanced, understanding that it's not about you ultimately, like in the full picture, it's about the health of the community ultimately. It's not just about being this individual and just being reactionary as an individual because you understand that we as human beings we can be very emotional and we can make really rash decisions based off our emotions. When you have that self-control, when you have that moral clarity and you can make decisions outside of yourself, that's called character in my personal opinion. That's what I mean when I say character. And the Yoruba called that beautiful. They said that character is beauty. So that's what I mean by character. So another thing when it comes to honor, just to show you how much black men of the past viewed honor as something critical and important. So they define it closer to humility and selflessness. I would say so. There, it's multiple. They all work together. It's harmonious, if you will. So having moral clarity, balance, having self control, being generous, knowing that it's not about you. It's multiple things that sort of work together to create this idea of honor. Yeah, because the West character is a little what in Western society we're a lot more individualistic ultimately. Um, and that was completely antithetical to African culture and to the idea of African honor, if you will. I mean, and it was very similar to the Japanese as well. I mentioned the Japanese earlier. I don't know if you were here, Smelly, but um, I'll briefly go over it again. The Japanese have the concept of retiring themselves permanently through self-infliction. And the Yoruba had that concept as well in their military. If a general failed to meet an objective, a big objective, they would request of him to retire himself through self-infliction. It's the same idea. Yeah, I'm sure the Yoruba word is probably deeper and already right, right, right. Okay, so where was I? Okay, so to give you guys an example, and I gotta leave soon. I gotta pick up my son actually pretty soon. I'll leave you guys with this. I think the most important one of the one of the examples I have for black men of the past really honoring this really valuing this idea of honor was in the during the slave trade. So in this book, American American founders or African founders, I'm sorry. So personally, I recommend this book, but at the same time, I don't. It's complicated because the book is about African founders, but it spends a lot of time on the diversity of slavery in America and how the whites utilize slavery in different ways. It spends a lot of time on that. That's like the bulk of the book, and every once in a while you'll learn about some African that did an exceptional thing, but I thought the book was gonna focus on that primarily. Anyway, that's just my grievance about it. Anyway, so so in that book, African Founders, he talks about how so there were some enslaved men from Ghana specifically, and for whatever reason, they asked these Ghanaian men, or there's some sort of dialogue or discussion about who their masters were or whatever. And one of the things that I thought was incredible, one of the things that they said about their master, one of the things that they pointed out was that, they said that, our master, he's not an honorable man. And that really stood out to me at the time, even before I thought about doing this video. Well, obviously before I thought about, doing this video, like out of all the things they could have said about their owner, their oppressor, if you will, is that out of all the things they could have said, they said he's not an honorable man. Like why are you concerned about him being an honorable man? Isn't it obvious? Like he's not a good person if he's owning slaves, or he's cruel. They could have said, oh well, he's a good master, if you will. Like he treats us well. This that and the other. There's a myriad of things they could have said about this man or whatever. But one of the things they said specifically that stood out to me was that, well, that was like one of the only things they said, at least from the book, from what he highlighted. He said, they said, this man is not an honorable man. And that really stuck with me. I can't pinpoint why that really stuck with me, but I guess, yeah, maybe it's because I we kind of got some insight. We kind of got some insight into what these men valued, and what they valued was a man who's honorable, even if you're a slave owner. That's I don't know. That's interesting to me personally. It just goes to show how much they valued the idea of honor and how important an honor code was. Because even if you are a bit immoral in this specific area of life, overall, who are you as a person? and they said he wasn't honorable, and that's just really interesting. I'm really curious what you guys think about that. Right, right, right. Yeah. I think From Nothing or somebody, he did a video about the similarities between the Edo culture of Japan and the Yoruba. And I've been seeing those similarities as well. And it's really, I don't know, it's really strange how similar some of them can be. Right, right, right. Yeah. That means there's honor still to be expected even in slavery. Right. Yeah. That's deep, man. That's deep. Out of all the things these men could have said, they were concerned about how dishonorable this man was. Not that he was a mean, nasty person, whatever. Like, he didn't have honor. Like, he didn't have good character. That's how I interpret what they were saying. Even though he's a slave owner, they're saying this man does not have good character in general. Like, yeah. Anyway, but I guess I'm saying that to say that honor, good character, was very important to African men, and I think that's something we should adopt as Afro descendant people, and we should use the term honor as well more in our culture. I don't hear it as much personally. I could be wrong. Maybe you guys hear it more often than me. But we talk about different things like having self control, having good character, great. But to really harmonize all those characteristics into one, we call it honor. And we have to teach our children to be honorable. And that was something very important to our ancestors. They made it very clear how important honor was. And our Ghanaian ancestors, if you will, they said, hey, like, even though this dude is a slaver, he is dishonorable. He has no honor. Like, that's an important value set of them that I feel we should incorporate into our daily life. Regarding honor during the slave master, remember there is a way to do anything. Hmm. Can you elaborate on that? What you mean? There is a way to do anything. I'm not sure what you mean. Huh? The Western paradigm generally is there's no honor amongst thieves. Right. Anecdotally, you can hear it in the difference in how Afro descendant people talk about crime. Huh. Man, please elaborate on that. I actually gotta go soon, but yes, you can be a slave master and still act honorable per se. Right, yeah. I agree. I agree. And that was their expectation apparently, because they made it a note to say this man, though he's a slaver, is not honorable. Like you would think those two things would go hand in hand, but they don't from their perspective, clearly. Yeah, that's kind of deep. It's again, the point I'm making is to show how deeply embedded the idea of being honorable is. And I think again, that's something we need to value as well as Afro descendant men. Right, 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 right. There's some people that I've dealt with, like even just like politically, like we have different political beliefs or whatever. There's some of them where I'm just like, man, like you have different political we have different political beliefs, but you don't have a good character. Like you're not an honorable person. Like I see how you move. But there are some people on the other end of the spectrum who, I have different political views from, and they are honorable people, and that's something I can respect. I respect deeply about it, and it was probably similar to a similar model to what those Ghanaian enslaved men were talking about. Like, yeah, you a slaver, we get it, but are you honorable? Are you an honorable person? Mm. Anyway, guys, definitely support the Kickstarter. You know, I completed this book. I just finished it pretty much. It has maps, illustrations. It's going to be a display of the most prodigious kings on the African continent. So definitely support it. It's about 30%, 40% funded right now. If we reach our goal and exceed it, there will definitely be more. I'm telling you this, guys. I'm telling you this book is gonna be really really good because it takes a unique African perspective. Um, and you know, speaking about these African kings, it takes a unique African perspective from the sources that I've used. Um, and there are going to be kings on there that you heard of, definitely, but there will also be kings on there that you've never heard of. I can almost guarantee that you've never heard of some of these individuals. And again, I'm in the process of I will start, you know, teach. I'm gonna start teaching my son, you know, African history, and I want to start with black men of the past, ultimately. So yeah, guys, thanks so much. Um, definitely be honorable, and definitely support the Kickstarter. And I'm out, guys. Let me see.